Have you ever tried to climb a mountain without actually climbing it? Sounds like an absurd question, right? But maybe it's possible in a video game? Anyway, all joking aside, you've read the title. We're gonna be trying to get every berry, B-side tape and crystal heart in Celeste without climbing a single time. Oh, and hopefully we can beat the game too, that's also important. Because 100%ing an entire game in a single video would take way too long, I'm only going to cover the first 7 A-sides in this video. I'll talk more about the rest of the game at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, so what are the rules? Well, we're going to use a mode in the game called Variant Mode, which is unlocked after beating all of the C-sides. One of these variants is called No Grabbing, which will obviously turn on. This makes sure we can't grab onto walls, but it does allow us to activate certain blocks like falling blocks or track blocks, scroller blocks and more. This will be useful for otherwise impossible rooms, so it's definitely important that you keep this in mind. And before you ask, yes, we can carry Theo, that doesn't count as grabbing. Anyway, with the rules established, let's start with the prologue. And we already have our first obstacle. We can't actually dash in this section, but we need to find a way to get on top of this wall. The solution is a technique called neutraling, which will be our main alternative to climbing. When Madeline wall jumps off a wall, she is usually forced into the opposite direction. However, if we hold neutral on the control stick while wall jumping, then she won't be forced and will still be relatively close to the wall. If we then hold back toward the wall, we actually gain height. This can be performed infinitely, if you are skilled enough. And with this new skill under our belt, the rest of the prologue is really a piece of cake. On to chapter 1. Because of the fact that we're allowed to activate track blocks, most of chapter 1 is pretty straightforward. A lot of rooms don't even require any neutrals, but there are 2 rooms that cause us a bit of trouble. First up, we have the 7th berry in the subchapter Crossing. Would normally grab onto both track blocks here and stay on them, but for obvious reasons we can't do that. But by getting to the left side of the track block and abusing its momentum, we can fling ourselves to the berry with style. And we're gonna be abusing momentum a ton throughout this run, so there's plenty more where that came from. Secondly, the last room of crossing is actually a twofold problem. Not only do we have to find a way to skip grabbing this track block, we also have to collect a berry, which is fairly out of the way. We can at least skip grabbing the track block by dashing up and activating the right side of it, but we need a spare dash to get that berry. As luck would have it though, there's a corner just under the block that we can neutral off of. This neutral is way harder than it looks though, but it works and that's what counts. Anyway, we end chapter 1 with every collectible. So far so good. And I think the game decided to give us a break, because the next chapter is even easier. This is because the main mechanic of the stage are the dream blocks, which have more to do with dashing than with climbing. Despite the fact that the crystal heart really puts your neutral skills to the test, there's really nothing stopping us from clearing the entire chapter. Now, a lot of people think Celestial Resort is the worst chapter in the game, but I don't really agree with that. My least favorite chapter is actually the bridge. Anyway, for this challenge, Resort does actually present a bit of an issue. There are again 2 rooms that require our attention, and they're all located in the first subchapter. The 7th berry has wings, which means it flies off screen when Madeline dashes in this room. That only leaves us with running and jumping, which simply aren't enough to get anywhere. Are we stuck now? Well, what if I told you that there was a way to dash without making the berry fly away? The secret is in the screen transition. When Madeline dashes through a screen transition, her dash speed is actually conserved into the next room. However, because we technically speaking never actually pressed the dash button in this room, the berry stays put. It's like a half-A press. So will this one extra dash be enough to get the berry? Sadly no, it doesn't even get us nearly far enough. Luckily, there are a couple of moves in this game that allow us to get way more distance out of a dash. One of these is called a hyper dash, or hyper for short, which is performed by holding down, right on the control stick, dashing, and then jumping afterward. Another similar move, a wave dash, can be performed in mid-air by dashing down right into the ground and jumping when you hit the ground. Lastly, there's a super dash or super. This is a hyper but without a down input, so you just press left or right. It doesn't give us as much horizontal distance as a hyper, but it does give us much more height. So you can choose any of these three moves. I personally went for a wave dash, and you can obtain the berry without climbing or dashing. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in at once, but sadly the next room isn't any easier. This is the room with the 10th berry. The first problem here is that we don't have enough dashes to clear the first part. The second problem is actually obtaining the berry, which might even require multiple grabs. Luckily, the first problem can be solved thanks to this alcove at the top. By wall jumping off the side of it, which is actually very precise, we get enough distance to clear the first part. However, the second problem is much bigger. At first I tried using a combination of hypers and supers to get to the berry, but that only gets you to here, and that simply isn't far enough. We absolutely need to grab onto the wall to cross this giant row of spikes. Luckily, I have another trick up my sleeve, and it has to do with the fact that spikes aren't actually as menacing as they seem. Let's turn on the game's hitboxes to explain why. As you can see, the part of the dust bunnies that actually hurts Madeline is slightly smaller than how they look visually. That means we can actually go under these with a precise hyper dash, followed by a crouch to make our hitbox smaller. Oh, wait a second. How did I jump off the air there? Well, that's thanks to a mechanic called coyote time, which lets you jump off a platform up to 5 frames after you've fallen off it. This margin of error is actually found in a lot of other platformers, it's not unique to Celeste. It can be found in 140, which I did a let's play of by the way. As you might have guessed, this hyperdash crouch combo is ridiculously challenging, but thankfully there's a consistent setup for it. Stand on this specific pixel, you can align yourself with the grey couch in the background, then quickly press jump and dash simultaneously. After that, you want to rapidly pause and unpause the game until you get to this frame. It's the final frame of coyote time. After that, unpause, then immediately jump, and you should get enough distance to grab the strawberry. Hey, future ML here. Apparently I forgot to mention the crystal heart. It can be gotten in the pink towel section of Huge Mess by backtracking through a couple of rooms. Just make sure to do this first so you can use the other 2 sections blocks as safe ground, otherwise you're going to get stuck in what I like to call neutral purgatory. Anyway, back to the video. And that marks the end of Resort. We're almost halfway through the game, and so far we've been able to collect everything. But will this last? Alrighty, now for my least favorite chapter, Ridge. And after this you'll see why I hate this chapter so much. There are 2 main mechanics in this stage that heavily impact a run. One of those are the headwinds, which cause us to get pushed away from walls and makes neutraling basically useless. The other mechanic are the scroller blocks, specifically the ones with spikes on the top. The spikes mean that these blocks can only be activated from the side, which will definitely prove to be a challenge. The only noteworthy thing about the first subchapter is this berry right here. We have to get a series of berry fragments without touching the ground, with a strong wind making things much harder. Luckily, if you fall off a ledge almost immediately after landing on it, the game is generous and doesn't reset the room. This might take some trial and error to get right though. The next checkpoint, which is called Shrine, has a ton of precise berries, but I'm only going to cover this one because it has quite an interesting solution. We have to pass a 3-room gauntlet here, featuring, of course, scroller blocks. The first room is a piece of cake, but the second and third rooms, not so much. In the second room, you would normally grab onto the scroller block and lead it through this vertical corridor, but we can't do that, of course. This is where our dash techniques from the Zord come in handy again. By doing a wave dash here, and remember that's one where you go in midair, you retain your dash. That allows us to activate the scroller block. Remember, activating does not count as grabbing, so this is perfectly legal. Then neutral off it, and use that spare dash we got from the wave dash to go through the vertical corridor. This is way more precise than it looks though, so don't be surprised if you spend about 10 minutes on this run room. Okay, now for the third room. So again, we have a scroller block that really wants us to grab it and move it through a narrow passageway, but this time we have a lot less space to work with. We also don't have access to any safe ground, so we're definitely not going to be able to use a wave dash, hyper dash, or a super dash. The tricks I've taught you so far all give us horizontal distance out of a dash, but not much height. Well, now is the time to change that, because we're going to add another tool to our toolbox, which is called wall bouncing. This one's actually very simple, so don't worry. You just dash up near a wall, then jump when you're right next to it. This will give you a ton of speed and height, much more than a regular wall jump would. So, using this trick and a couple of neutrals of the scroller block, we can finally get this berry. We're already halfway through the chapter, so let's take a quick break and look at some completely over-the-top swag strats, just for fun. Okay, playtime's over, because the second half of this chapter is absolute freaking hell. Almost every room here is difficult and worth mentioning, so this is gonna be a really long segment. Before we can even start with this subchapter, we first have to collect this excruciatingly hard flying berry. This took me about 10 minutes to do, I'm not even kidding. The first actual room sadly isn't any easier. Using this bubble doesn't get us up this wall, so what do we do instead? A precise wave dash of this teensy bit of ground. Not only that, but we need to make full use of the coyote time phenomenon I explained earlier. There's really no margin for error here, it's frame perfect. We made it to safety. Nope, just kidding, because in the next room, there is a literal wall in between these two bubbles. We seem to barely not get enough height to go under it, and going above is not looking promising in the slightest. I hate to say it, but this room is actually possible. Go grab your popcorn, because I am going to explain one of the most complicated tricks in this game. Alrighty, the first thing I'm gonna do... Alrighty, the first thing I'm going to do is turn on the game's hitboxes again. I've already mentioned how crouching reduces your hitbox, but that's not the only scenario where this happens. Because of some wacky programming, downward dashing will actually achieve the same result. And the smaller hitbox will of course be really useful to get around these spikes, but we would need a right or upright dash to make it work. Introducing Schrödinger's dash. No wait, introducing demo dashing. By holding down, dashing, and then changing direction within 5 frames, you can keep the smaller crouch hitbox in any dash direction. But at the end of the dash, the game makes us uncrouch and we regain our normal hitbox. Awesome! Side note, if you're playing on version 1.4, there's a crouch dash binding which actually does this for you. So this allows us to barely squeeze past the bottom of the stupidest wall of the year, and by timing the uncrouch perfectly, we can grab the other side of the wall and get to the end of this disastrous room. Okay, the next room is luckily just a small inconvenience, but the fourth room requires another precise wave dash. And you guessed it, by golly, here's another one in the fifth room. After that, the rest of Old Trail is difficult but totally doable. Same goes for most of Cliff Face, actually. Hey, I said most of Cliff Face was easy. Don't worry, it's only 2 rooms. For pacing reasons, I'll start with the easier of the 2 rooms, which is the room with the second berry. For once, the berry itself isn't actually the issue, it's just beating the room. This wall is too high to clear, even with a super dash. Well, not with a regular super dash, at least. There's an extended variant of supers and hypers, which basically means you retain your dash after doing a normal super or hyper. How? Well, it's easy. Just dash, wait on the ground a bit to regain your dash, and then jump. And voila, ceci n'est pas une difficulté. Time for the last room of Ridge. I told you this was my least favorite chapter. Anyway, let's look at the room to see what we're dealing with. What the f*** is this? 4 scroller blocks? And you can't stand on them? Okay, I don't think this one will be possible grabless, but I'm going to try anyway. At least we can figure out the minimum number of grabs, that's 4, 1 for each scroller block. And luckily we can already cut out the last one, because we can just neutral off the block instead of grabbing. So now I have 3 grabs left, but these ones are really insane. After some tinkering, I found that you can skip the first block too, but this one is way more precise than the fourth one. You have to activate it first to get it out of the way, then do a precise wave dash with maximum use of coyote time, and then dash when you're almost touching the spikes to just barely make it to the first bubble. I get this trick about once every 5 to 10 tries, and that's with tons of practice. Also, Microsoft Word thought it could be funny by putting in 5 years as autocorrect, but it's not that bad work. Anyway, technically we can do that, so now there are only 2 scroller blocks left. And honestly, at this point, I had completely run out of ideas. The second block takes us up a whole screen, and we don't have many options for vertical movement, so I think this one is impossible. And the third one? Well, this one might be possible, but the setup for it is even worse than the first block. Basically what you do is use the second block to go past the third block, and then neutral of this teensy bit of ground. This is like 5 pixels or something? I don't know. And after that, I don't know what you do. Maybe get a spare dash, wall bounce off the third block, do more precise wall jumps off these bits of ground. Either way, I don't have a perfect setup yet, but this is a starting point. And that's how far I got without any help. 2 grabs saved, 2 grabs required. But surely someone must have figured out how to do this berry. So I went online and found this clip. As it turns out, when scroller blocks are about to respawn, you can actually stand on them, because the spikes haven't loaded in yet. With this trick and an extra wall bounce I just didn't notice, you can get past the first 2 blocks consistently. All you have to do is jump or neutral off the wall 6 times after activating the blocks, and that will make sure you land on them at the perfect time. Great! And what about the third block? Well, this one's still ridiculously hard, but it's technically feasible. So yeah, this berry is now theoretically possible. I say theoretically because there is no way in hell I'm doing this one legitimately. Hi again, future ML here, and as you can probably tell from the way I cut myself off there, I did manage to do this room in its entirety. Granted, it took me about an hour or 2 to do, but still I managed to do it. Anyway, I'm sick of this chapter, so let's just move on to Mirror Temple and never talk about Rich ever again. I'll pretend those 2 don't exist for now. We made it. Compared to Chapter 4, Chapter 5 is like a walk in the park. Well, a park filled with the occasional wasp. I'm quickly going to go over these as they don't involve any new techniques and no one likes wasps anyway. Here, the corridors are just wide enough to make neutraling possible. This actually took me about 5 minutes to do, which for a room this short is quite a while. Wait, what's that noise? You're saying there's an easier way to do this? Come on! Okay, anyway, here's a dash block that is completely blocking the way to an otherwise easy to get berry. Luckily, there's a small gap here which can be damage dashed through, but still, come on. And here are some more narrow corridors with dash blocks. Golly gee. Normally, you'd use the bubble to grab onto this wall and then use a dash to get to the other side, but that doesn't work for obvious reasons. And neutraling here just barely works. Oh, my script said, make the joke subtle. Whoops. The wall is so close to the ceiling here that it's basically impossible not to bonk. I even tried wall bouncing off the right wall and it still doesn't work. God, this is almost insulting. So you can technically get past this wall without any special tricks, but as with most things in this run, it's way too precise and it would probably take me another 2 hours to do. That's why I'm going to rapidly pause and unpause the game again, just like I did in chapter 3, to make this jump way easier. Even then, it's still hard to press all the buttons at the right times, so I recommend trying this trick at half speed first, and then gradually working your way up to 100% speed. Anyway, as I mentioned previously, the rest of chapter 5 is really a walk in the park, but there's one more trick I'd like to show you. In the subchapter Search, you normally need to get 3 keys for 100% completion, but we can actually skip 2 of those. How? Well, the closest we can get to where we need to be is this room right here. From here, we can do a reverse super dash to make it across. Yeah, I know, another variant of the super dash. I know it's complicated, but this one is actually easier than it seems. You just dash in one direction, turn around, and jump in the other direction. I know that's completely beyond the laws of physics, and it doesn't look like it should work, but it does. It also works for hypens and wave dashes, so that's cool. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to get at least 1 key for this berry, because otherwise you're gonna have to come back here. So, why did I bring this up? We're gonna need this trick later, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's just move on to reflection. For a chapter this late into the game, there are really not that many things worth mentioning. 1. There are no berries, and the crystal heart and B-side tape are easy as pie. Strawberry pie. No wait, never mind. 2. This room at the start of Hollows poses a bit of a challenge, but with a little persistence and precision, it's not much of a threat either. 3. In the split path of Hollows, all rooms are possible, although I don't recommend doing this one. It's pain. 4. You can even get to the Easter egg room without climbing, although it is quite precise.
There is nothing worse than a Kevin.
Wow, we're already at the final chapter. Things have gone way better than I expected. We haven't had to climb a single time, and we've gotten every collectible so far. So let's hope this chapter doesn't break our streak. Things are starting off promising because 0 meters, 500 meters and 1000 meters are all totally doable. As for 1500 meters, there's one berry worth looking at. And what a surprise, it's another dashless berry. This one isn't as crazy as the one in chapter 3 though, because you can actually cheat a bit. If you dash halfway through the challenge and then rush to the top, you can just barely scratch the berry. Now that that's done, let's go to 2000 meters. Oh no. Actually, most of these challengers are more difficult than they are novel, so I'm just quickly going to show all of them in a montage.
It's called a road, it's called a rainbow road. It is a road that you go. It's called a road, it's called a rainbow road. And you will know when you get there. It's called a road, it's called a rainbow road. It is a road that you go. It's a road that you go when you die. It's a road called Rainbow Road. It's a road we're all gonna go. It's a road called Rainbow Road. It's got Princess Peach, Mario, and the Toad. It's a road called Rainbow Road. It's a road we're all gonna go. We'll go. It's Rainbow Road. It's where you go when you die. It's Rainbow Road. I'll miss you again, Uncle. It's Rainbow Road. It's where you go when you die. It's Rainbow Road. I'll miss you again on Rainbow Road.
we actually made it. I didn't expect that to go so smoothly. On to 2500 meters. This one does actually require some explanations, like with this first berry for example. Normally you would grab onto the dash block and yeet off it that way, but with a surprisingly precise neutral, you can achieve the same yeet without actually grabbing. The same technique can be used to grab the fourth berry. Also, I didn't do door skip. Sorry for letting you all down, guys. I deeply apologize. I really hope you forgive me for this. God, what can I do as recompense for you guys? Oh, we're already in the final room? Great, okay, let's get this over with. Oh no, that's horrible. Oh, no way. Why now? We are so close to the end of the game. We've been through so much pain. Is this punishment because I didn't do door skip? All joking aside, this obstacle is a serious issue. On the surface it doesn't seem so bad, just demo dash above the block and get to the other side. But this is a dash block, it pushes us out. Demo dashing here is futile. If we could just make sure the dash block stays in place and doesn't push us out, we'd be golden, but that doesn't seem to be an option. What else can we do here? Okay, so it is actually possible to get through this gap, but you're not gonna believe how complicated it is. First of all, we need to do a reverse hyperdash on this platform, which is the same technique we used in Mirror Temple. The next step is to jump on the very edge of the platform, making use of the Goooat time phenomenon from chapter 3. Yeah, we're pulling out all the stops here. After that, dash up at the absolute peak of your jump, and yes, it has to be the very tippity top. Okay, we're almost there. Now we just have to neutral off this wall without wasting a single frame of time, and finally, we jump off the wall, demo dash above the dash block, and get to the other side. I am not kidding, it is as hard as it seems. Now, there is actually one thing I've been hiding from you throughout this section. I didn't actually do it myself, I'm not that crazy. So I used this thing, it's called a tool-assisted superplay, or speedrun, or TAS for short. What you're seeing here is an overview of what inputs I want this tool to press and for how long. Thanks to CraftyMan6 for making this TAS, I didn't do any of it myself. If you want to see more info about how TASing works, I'll link to his video in the description, he explains it a little better than me. Anyway, back to the game. We've now reached 3000 meters, which is really just a victory lap at this point. All that's left between us and the summit is checkpoint number 2, Spiky Boogaloo. Normally, you'd need to climb on both of these walls to get up to the top, but we can actually dash through them too. The only problem is, we only have 2 dashes, and we need to use one of them to even get to the first wall. Well, turns out it's not that much of an issue, because you can use a dash to go through the dash crystal and regain both of your dashes. From there, just do 4 dashes and a funeral, I mean a wall bounce, and we've reached the summit. We actually did it. We climbed a mountain without climbing it. Not only that, but we got all 170 berries, all B-side tapes, and all crystal hearts. I'm quite proud of that, to be honest. Now, I know we're still not anywhere close to 100%ing the entire game yet, but I'm going to have to end this video here. Consider this a test run. If you like this video, let me know, and if I get enough of a response, I'll definitely upload more videos covering all the post-game content, including the core, the B-sides, the C-sides, and even Farewell. But that one's gonna be horrible. At the outset, I did not expect this challenge to be so complicated, but I'm glad I completed it anyway. It's so satisfying to use these tricks that you would normally find in the speedrun to try something completely new. And for that reason, I highly recommend trying this out for yourself. Maybe apart from that one room in Summit, but as a gift, I've put a video in the description containing just the raw footage of me beating every room with that cut out. So do check it out if you're struggling with some of these harder rooms. Before we go, I still want to thank a couple of people for their contributions to this challenge. CraftyMan6 for making a video about this topic way before me, helping with the tasks in that one horrible room, and just being a great person. Sample for doing this challenge but with a much stricter rule set. eUniverse Cat for being incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to beating this game grabless. And honestly, if it weren't for their videos, this run would have probably only gotten 164 berries instead of all 170. Everyone involved in this game's Game Masters event for speedrunning this challenge in just over an hour, but also commentating it so well that I ended up using the video as a reference. Deku, Lydia and Augmented for continuing to support me even if the video took ages to make. So all of their channels and relevant videos will be put in the description, so go check that out. Wait, I still actually have one more person to thank. Or not just one actually. It's you, the viewers, for watching till the end. Honestly, if you've gotten this far, it might be a good idea to just subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to get notified of my uploads. I'm sorry to be such a sellout, but really, if you've gotten this far, I would appreciate it. Anyway, that's it for me. Have a great day and keep being mad, lads.
Man, I did not expect this video to become
31
minutes long when I started commentating, but I guess there was just that much to explain.